An investigation by Reuters has revealed that the company Johnson & Johnson poisoned babies, not millions of babies, maybe not even tens of millions of babies, but possibly hundreds of millions of babies with a cancer-causing carcinogen, asbestos, found in its talcum powder. For decades, they knew that it was causing the problem. They knew that there was cancer-causing agents in their talcum powder since at least 1972. And not only did this become a problem, but they continued to do it even after they knew that it was there. Now, recently, this came to light in an investigation done by Reuters, which centered around the lawsuit by Darlene Coker, who was a mother of 2 daughters and ran a massage school in Lumberton, a small town in Texas. In other words, during the course of her adult life, she's used the talcum powder quite a lot, not just in the care for her children, but in her job as a teaching massage as well. Now, Johnson & Johnson didn't tell the FDA that at least 3 tests from 3 different labs from between 1972 and 1975 had found asbestos in his talc. And in one case, the levels were reported as rather high. So it wasn't just it was there. In at least one of the cases, it was rather high. And that's very something to begin with. Now, Johnson & Johnson denied the claim. They claimed that their baby powder was asbestos-free. Now, as her lawsuit, the woman in question sued Johnson & Johnson and Johnson & Johnson was able to avoid handing over the tests, which means their own records, which showed that the asbestos was there. Now, those files were suppressed under the idea that they were confidential and sensitive to the running of the company, and if that they were made public, it would give their competitors an advantage. Well, evidently, knowledge of you killing people's babies would probably be very advantageous to your competitors, being that people would stop buying your garbage. Now, her lawyer requested to make the case against the baby powder, but eventually she had to drop the lawsuit according to her lawyer because when you are the plaintiff, you have the burden of proof, and they just didn't have it because of Johnson & Johnson's cover-up. A Reuters examination of those documents, as well as a deposition and trial testimony, shows that at least from 1971 to the early 2000s, the company's raw talc and finished powders sometimes has deposited for small amounts of asbestos, and the company's executives, mine managers, scientists, doctors, and lawyers fretted about the problem and how to address it while failing to disclose it to regulators or the public. Now, the information, the proof about this, eventually came forward when Johnson & Johnson was sued enough times. Eventually, it was suspected that their talc caused cancers. People who hired lawyers who had, decades-long experience in lawsuits that go against companies that eventually end up going on for decades to try to prove these kinds of things, to prove these criminal acts by many corporations. There was even litigation involving workers exposed to asbestos. So the question remains, why not change it? If you know that your company is poisoning children, and you know you're going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble for doing that, why not change it to try to minimize the damage? Well, see, they chose not to do that. They chose to continue putting the same ingredients in the talc powder that was known to cause cancer, even after they knew about it. Why? Because a sudden change in the manufacturing process would have been noticed. In one particular example, if they suddenly changed the production process to something that was more expensive, like trying to filter out the asbestos, people would notice. Shareholders would notice. People would notice that it suddenly became more expensive, because that's not what a company does. A company does not suddenly make things more expensive for themselves. They make it cheaper. If there had been a change to the process that made manufacturing, lowering the cost of it, that wouldn't be noticed, because that's a very common practice in business. So, in other words, even just simply not poisoning babies anymore would have been something that would have been noticed and gotten them in trouble for the previous poisoning of babies. So rather than do the right thing and not kill babies, they decided to continue doing so, because that's what's best for the bottom line. It is better for them to line their own pockets at the expense of the lives of babies. And I can't stress how cartoonishly evil this is. They would rather do that than not kill babies. Just think about that. It was insane. Even an FDA official commenting in 1975 on the talc testing method used by Johnson & Johnson showed why they would not go public even to any degree. No mother was going to powder her baby with 1% of a known carcinogen, irregardless of the large safety factor. There is no way that you can blame anything but capitalism for this. It is absolutely irrefutable that the poisoning of hundreds of millions of babies occurred so that some collection of capitalists could fill out their bottom line and make more money. I mean, it's largely acknowledged how evil cigarette manufacturers are and the amount of blood they have on their hands. But at least in this day and age, everybody knows how bad cigarettes are for you, and then the people who choose to do so of their own free will. But to have done this to babies and hidden it for decades, it's cartoonishly evil to a point where I don't even have the words to describe this. It's just simply straight up the inhuman face, the reality of capitalism.